Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of the most underrated players in the NBA right now, and I am extremely excited to see what he looks like on this Grizzlies team this upcoming season. I've always believed that he is unbelievably talented. When you go back to me covering the 2018 NBA draft, I had him just behind Luka in that draft. I had Luka ranked 1, Jaren Jackson Jr. ranked 2, because at the time I thought that this was a modern version of Chris Bosh, essentially, that we were looking at as him as a prospect. A guy that is mobile, can play the 4 or the 5, can space, is a really good offensive player that can punish mismatches if you put a smaller defender on him. That's who I thought Jaren Jackson Jr. was. But it turns out he might even be better than that, because the defensive ability that he showed in college, but I was a little bit concerned about how it would translate to the NBA level, all of that stuff is there. Of course, he's a defensive player of the year caliber guy. And what he brings defensively might be the most unique defensive skill set that we have in the entire league. It's really hard to find a player that has better timing, better instincts in terms of rim protection than Jaren Jackson Jr. does. And the difference between him and a lot of other rim protectors is a lot of other guys, the Rudy Goberts, the Clint Capellas of the world, they are great at defending the rim. Brook Lopez, they're great at defending the rim. They can just stand at the rim and be great in that one exact scenario you need them to be great in. But they can't guard ball screens super well. Some of those guys better than others. And they can't switch on to perimeter defenders whatsoever. Jaren Jackson Jr. can defend the rim on the level of those guys while also being a switchable defender, being able to stay in front of guys defensively, even guards, even wings. That is a skill set that I would argue no other player in the entire league has. But when you clicked on the video, you already knew all these things about Jaren Jackson. You already knew that he was a really good defender. You already knew about the skill set that he has on that on the floor. But the things I'm starting to get excited about last season, as well as what he's doing with Team USA this year, is a lot of the offensive stuff. Now, since he's gotten to the league, he's mostly been a really high volume, at least for a front court guy, a big, typically, three-point shooter. That's been his main thing that he's brought to the table offensively, is he is going to shoot a ton of threes. He's going to be a good spacer, and having someone that is at his level defensively that also isn't going to punish you with his spacing offensively is incredibly valuable just in that, and is an incredibly difficult skill set to find around the league. However, last season with Team USA this offseason, I'm starting to see even more continued growth from Jaren Jackson that just continues to excite me, not only in terms of what he can do for Memphis this year, how that's going to continue to help them improve, assuming he stays healthy, but also what he's going to look like in these first 25 games without Ja Morant, what Memphis is going to look like as a team overall. Of course, they brought in Marcus Smart, but are they going to continue to prioritize Jaren Jackson offensively? And seeing what that looks like is really exciting to me. We're starting to see more opportunities where against mismatches he could punish guys in the post, or from the elbows, from the perimeter, even attacking closeouts. He's able to blow by guys and get to the rim, maybe even a little bit of passing instincts in there. All of that stuff to me is incredibly exciting for a player that, even if he stopped developing right now, is an incredibly impactful defensive player and floor spacer. But once you start adding all of this other stuff where you can't just deal with him as a shooter, you have to deal with him attacking a closeout, you have to deal with him attacking mismatches, you have to deal with him creating from the elbows. That to me only increases the value of Jaren Jackson Jr. that much more. And moving forward for Memphis, something that I'm really curious about, whether that be this season or moving forward, is what the long-term vision is for him. What's the long-term plan? When you think about what Memphis is at their best over the next couple of seasons, where does Jaren Jackson Jr. fit into that? Where does he play? Because part of me wonders if, as he continues to get better at dealing with injuries, get a little bit stronger, get a little bit more comfortable at the NBA level, part of me wonders if Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 is actually the long-term destiny of Memphis. And of course, they've had Steven Adams, they've had Jonas Valanciunas, they've had guys like that at the 5 alongside him, guys that are more bruising, more punishing, can deal with some of the stronger bigs in the league. And you still want to have guys like that on the roster. But when they really need to be at their best, when they're hopefully at some point for them in the Western Conference Finals, Game 7, last 5 minutes of the game, is Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5 in those lineups? I kind of think that he is, because all that offensive stuff that he brings to the table, in addition to the incredible defensive stuff, all that fits extremely well at the 5 with the way that they have their roster set up. Of course, as a ball screen partner alongside Ja, but also it allows you to do stuff with other guys on the ball outside of just Ja doing everything, because instead of having 2 non-spacers off the ball and Ja and whoever the traditional big is, you just have one, and that's just Ja, because Jaren Jackson is a really good spacer for a front court player. And that also unlocks a lot of defensive stuff for you, because if teams really don't want to deal with Jaren Jackson, they can put him in a ball screen, maybe get him switched on to someone and put him in the corner. It's harder for him to have an impact at the 4 than it would be at the 5, just because he's going to be involved so much more. And part of me wonders if that's the long-term destiny of their team, is they're going to be at their most effective when Jaren Jackson plays the 5. And these kinds of offensive developments that we're seeing late last season, as well as this offseason with Team USA, makes him that much more devastating of a player if then you start to put him at the 5 as well, because he's constantly going to be a mismatch for the other team. Now, obviously, there's a couple of big caveats with Jaren Jackson. One, injuries have been a problem for him throughout his career. It's something that he's going to have to figure out, because he's going to be someone they're going to be counting on big time this season and moving forward, and you got to be on the floor for that. The other part of that is he doesn't play as much as you'd like him to, not just from injuries, but because of fouls. And he's a really, really good defensive player, but still has a tendency to foul a little bit too much. There's some offensive foul stuff in there that's not great either, in terms of moving screens and things like that. That needs to improve. 100% that needs to improve. And then when you're talking about someone that could be one of the best players in the entire conference, an all-NBA caliber guy, you got to be playing 30, 35 minutes a game. You can't be out there for 25 minutes a game because you're in foul trouble, and that's a problem. And then, of course, if you're talking about him as a full-time 5, he's got to continue to get stronger and deal with, guys like Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid, and of course in the East. That's something that's going to continue to be an issue if you're thinking about him as a 5, which is why matchup-wise, you do have to have, some of those bigger bruising guys on the roster. But basically what I'm getting at is I'm extremely excited to see what Jaren Jackson looks like for Memphis this year, specifically in those first 25 games without Ja, 25 games, whatever it is. It might be a little bit clunky at the beginning because they do rely a lot on Ja for their offensive creation. Now they've got Marcus Smart in there. How exactly is all that going to work? But I want to see if they're like, you know what? We think Jaren Jackson's the second best player on the roster. Or maybe in some scenarios, maybe he's the best guy on the roster. Maybe he's someone that you need to prioritize way more, even when Ja does come back and when he is out there. That's the level that Jaren Jackson might be approaching, is not just someone that you see as this incredibly versatile defensive guy and connector and floor spacer, but also maybe a really devastating offensive player as well. The skill set is 100% there and will continue to grow and develop, in my opinion. Granted, I've pretty much always been a big Jaren Jackson guy, and I'm excited to see what he looks like when he's more prioritized in the offense, when Ja isn't out there, whether it be the beginning of the season or just throughout the year, when he's healthy, and when he's not in foul trouble. If he can continue to improve on all those things, I think the sky is the limit for what Jaren Jackson could be for Memphis. And by the way, if things continue to go south for Ja, you can feel pretty comfortable in the idea that you've got a foundational player outside of him in Triple J that really could, I think, become an all-NBA caliber guy for years and years and years for this team. And that's a really exciting thought if you're Memphis, and a comforting thought as well with how weird the stuff with Ja has gotten over the years. This is going to be a really interesting season for him, but I truly think that we're looking at a star in the making in Memphis and Triple J.